Public Q&A presents AskReddit question. What is your favorite, very creepy fact? I saw a news story on a woman with a rare type of epilepsy that causes her to see everything like a slideshow, or a video game that gets 10 FPS. She described watching cars drive by and saying they freeze in place for a moment, and then snap into position further down the road over and over. Her entire life is played out in front of her eyes in still frames, and because if that she wears blinders or earmuffs, because her senses are constantly contradicting one another and it overwhelms her. I can't imagine how horrifying it would be to experience life like she does. Cotard's delusion is a rare psychiatric condition, severe cases of which cause the sufferer to wholeheartedly believe they are dead, putrefying, or simply do not exist. Some Cotard's patients refuse to eat, as they do not believe they need to, with one notable patient dying of starvation. Another woman once asked to be taken to a morgue, to be with the other dead people. I literally have a neighbor that has this, and I never knew what it was called. She constantly explains how she is dead, has no pulse, and how her husband denies her from being buried or sent to the morgue. She sincerely believes she is dead even if proved otherwise. Scaphism, the worst way of execution I've ever heard of. The word comes from Greek, which stands for hollowed out. The victim is trapped between two boats, fed and covered with milk and honey, which then attracts all kinds of insects and vermin that fester and devours you over a couple of days. Kinda like that rat thing where they heat up the cage, or whatever, so the rats escape through your body. Exactly, that was a typical medieval torture method which was used even for petty thieves if I remember correctly. This was also shown in an episode of Game of Thrones. Room 101 contained this, for Winston Smith. Similar, his was a mask full of starving rats that would have devoured his face. I once visited Warwick Castle, and I remember looking at an oubliette in the corner of the dungeon. It was nicknamed the Forgotten Chamber if I recall right. They would open the grate, push the person inside this small L-shaped space that was so small you would basically always be sitting down with your shoulders and arms scraping against the walls either side, then they'd close the grate and leave you there. You'd literally be forgotten about and left there until you eventually went insane and died from malnutrition in this tiny, claustrophobic, silent space in the dark. The thought of it scared me to death, the idea of being left to starve to death in this tiny space under the ground. Our ancestors were truly cruel and sadistic bastards. A human corpse decomposes 4 times faster in water than in the ground, and 8 times faster in open air than in the ground. Sky burial is such a crazy cool concept. When I am dead, just throw me in the trash, and then burn the trash so it gives the bar that nice smoky smell, and it goes up in the air and turns into stars. That doesn't sound right, but I don't know enough about stars to dispute it. When a person is electrocuted in the electric chair, they feel everything. They are fully aware of their bodies being fried as it happens in real time. One inmate who survived the first round of electrocution said it tasted like cold peanut butter. The children's story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin was based on a real event. Hamelin town records start with this event. The earliest written record is from the Town Chronicles in an entry from 1384 which states, "It is 100 years since our children left. No one know what or who took the children, but there's records of the entire town's children being taken." I actually did some research into this. Historians believe the children were not taken as in kidnapped, no mysterious man grabbed all the children and took off. Instead, an illness probably spread which mostly impacted children, who have a weaker immune system, and are not as strong. The illness probably killed most, if not all, of the children. Another theory is that the rat catcher didn't kidnap them, instead the parents gave them to him as payment instead of money. That's how it's presented in the Lore podcast. German states were creating new settlements in eastern regions and needed settlers. Individuals would go from town to town offering payment for people, including kids. Parents in desperate need of cash sold off their children and created the Pied Piper story to hide their shame. Doesn't sound plausible now that I type it out. In 1844, there was a case of hysteria in a French convent of nuns. One started meowing, and after a week, all the nuns were meowing harmoniously in the afternoons. It didn't stop until neighbors called soldiers. There was a similar happening in Germany. The entire population of the village danced and partied themselves to death. That was likely more due to mold in the grain they used to make bread. They were literally tripping their faces off constantly. If this is true, then makes a lot more sense. Look up ergot poisoning. It's a plausible explanation to a bunch of the fucky-wucky stuff from history: witches, werewolves, demon sightings. It's not that there used to be more supernatural occurrences, it's just that everyone in the past was constantly accidentally tripping balls. Edit: for everyone saying there's no way ergot poisoning was a possible factor in the witch trials, here's a PBS article on it. Web address. It happened hundreds of years ago. No one can conclusively say why the witch trials happened, everything is a theory. It's very likely it was a combination of many things, of which ergot poisoning may have been one. Also, being in the dark alone and scared, with no light source, map, or phone, does crazy things to your brain. When you happen to be murdered, there is only an about 40% chance that your murderer will be found and punished. After getting stung by a cone snail, you don't feel the sting for a little bit. There is no antivenom, and it can be lethal. Treatment is basically keeping the victim alive until the venom wears off. That's just like the blue-ringed octopus. But we gotta restrict blood flow from bite. Right? I think it's more that you need to get put on a respirator until the paralysis wears off. The human brain continues to give off electrical signals for 20 to 40 seconds after death. This is why sometimes people move right after they die. We took my mom off life support and held her hands as she passed. She had been unconscious for days at that point, unmoving. When she died, her whole body moved like she was having a seizure, which was really upsetting. It's just the last bit of electricity in your brain going out. Also, hearing is the last sense to leave, so if you are with someone who is dying, please keep talking to them. Hey, just in case you didn't know, and also to perhaps make it better for you, the body has lots of reflexes that don't require any kind of consciousness. For example, people with very strong brain injuries might still grip stuff in their hands, as that is something humans are born with. Moving arms also is possible while brain dead. Talking to them is something you should definitely do just in case, but I hope you or others around didn't interpret her movements as pain or similar, because it wasn't. Edit: a great video by Midlife Crisis about this topic, might seem long, but once you start you won't care. A description of what's called the Lazarus sign, that lots of brain-dead people show. The reflex causes the dead to sit up, briefly raise their arms and drop them, crossed, onto their chests. It happens because while most reflexes are mediated by the brain, some are overseen by reflex arcs, which travel through the spine instead. There is a rare genetic disease called fatal familial insomnia, where over the course of months you literally cannot go or be put to sleep no matter what you take or what you do. The symptoms get progressively worse until finally you stay awake watching yourself go insane until you die from exhaustion. There is a guy by the name of Richard Syajan who documented this genetic disease on YouTube, and with each video you can tell his mental state gets worse and worse. It eventually gets so bad that his last videos are just weird conspiracy theories, and as expected from a disease with no cure, he sadly passed away. Before he started suffering from it, since it can sit in your genetic code for years without you noticing, he was an artist. May he rest in peace. Edit: peace not peace, fuck autocorrect. And also he apparently got it from an antibiotic he took, instead of it just being in his genetic code for years, because the dumbass me didn't read the description. Probably should be clarified that while the symptoms and mental state could be similar, Syajan clarified in the video description of his first video regarding his insomnia, that he did not have fatal familial insomnia, but rather, it was a side effect from taking a specific antibiotic that created a neurotoxic reaction resulting in his inability to sleep. Somewhat recently, 2012, scientists discovered over 1,400 new species of bacteria living in the belly button. Everyone's belly button ecology is unique, added to the fingerprints and snowflakes list. In that same study, one volunteer's belly button harbored bacteria strands that had only ever been found in soil from Japan, where this man has never been. The bodies of the sailors who died on the Edmund Fitzgerald are still down there, almost perfectly preserved, due to the water at that depth being just barely above freezing. Divers who have explored the wreckage have seen their bodies frozen in place to parts of the ship, and have come back reporting that they feel as if they were being followed during their time underwater. Photos were taken, but per the request of the crew's family, they have never been released to the public. Edit source. I always forget that the Edmund Fitzgerald sunk in 1975. It had a lore that make it seems like it happened in like 1870. The last message sent from them was "We're holding our own," in response to a message asking them if they were okay during a bad storm. The lake, it is said, never gives up her dead when the skies of November turn gloomy. My music teacher used to make us sing that song every year in elementary school. Now that song creeps me out even more, thank you. Squeezing someone's balls very tightly can have roughly the same effect as using an epinephrine pen. Don't try this please, it will be very painful. Will this work to temporarily stop anaphylaxis? It might, but it might kill them in the process, because squeezing someone's balls hard enough can bring adrenaline levels in their body to dangerous levels as well as causing damage. Bro could have told me before I tried. Your insides are constantly moving around and stuff. I hate this, but it's my favorite for that reason. I tried on a proper tight corset once. When I took it off, I could feel my inside slide back down out of my rib cage. It happens during pregnancy too. All your organs shift to accommodate a baby. The week or so where they're noticeably shifting back is unenjoyable. Yup. I am getting flashbacks to the slithery jelly feeling shudders. It's true, I work in an operating room. When we have bowel procedures, the intestines are just all pulled out of the surgical site, so the surgeons can get access to the part they need to operate on. When they put them back in, they just put them back in without sorting them out in any particular order or neatness. The bowels will sort themselves out, and will right themselves. The island of Okinoshima in the inland sea of Japan is known for two reputable things. One, it's named Rabbit Island because of the overabundance of wild rabbits, and two, the island has World War II ruins of a chemical weapons factory, creating poison-like mustard gas in its attacks on China. So vital was its secrecy to the Japanese government that they tried to wipe its location off maps. I've always wanted to go there. It's a bit of a pain to get there. There are only 2 boats a day or something, but the bunnies are cute and come straight over to greet you as soon as you get there. They're a bit bitey though. Watch your fingers. Indian followers of the Zoroastrianism don't bury or burn their dead. Instead, they leave the bodies in special towers, exposed to the elements to be eaten by vultures. Unfortunately, the vultures are now endangered, leaving the bodies to slowly rot. Well, I learned about 20 comments ago that bodies rot 8x faster in open air than in the ground, so the slowly part is debatable. What is my life right now? One reason that crows and ravens are associated with death is because they would often follow armies as they marched to battle. Being both carrion birds and extremely intelligent, they realized that a large group of armed men marching on one direction meant that there would be a tasty meal of corpses to eat soon afterwards. A feast for crows, one might say. Murder's got a feast. I mean, that's positive. Corvids are so intelligent. Love it. The US is still missing 6 nuclear bombs somewhere on the continent from Broken Arrow incidents. One is known to be near a Goldsboro, NCB 52 crash site. It is estimated to be buried in 55 m of swamp muck. The arming switch was armed but had detached from the bomb. A second bomb was recovered with 3 of 4 switches armed. Tarantulas can swim. Guess I have to move to the ISS. There is, as of yet, no conclusive evidence that there isn't at least one tarantula on the ISS, edit, and it is, thus, no longer constrained by gravity. The fulmar is a bird that defensively spits an orange oily substance at attackers. When the attacker tries to go to wash the oil off its wings, it often drowns because it is no longer buoyant. Also, that stomach oil is a nutrient-rich food source, so feel free to make a fulmar spit it in your mouth. I was with this until the last sentence. The average human will shed about 40 pounds of skin throughout their lifetime. About 3,000 people disappear every year in the US and are never found again. This is really scary and sad. One of my worst fears. Anglerfish. When anglerfish mates, the male literally deforms its body and fuses with the female, then they live together for the rest of their lives. Can't mention this without sharing how the male anglerfish gets completely screwed. Is there footage of this happening in real life? 'Cause I gotta see this weird shit. Best I could do for you web address. The last use of a guillotine in France was the same year the first Star Wars movie premiered. 1977, but honestly, if you had the choice to get killed by a boring needle or a majestic guillotine. It's estimated that there's around 25 to 50 active serial killers in the US. That seems kinda low. It's hard not to get caught nowadays with cameras everywhere and DNA technology being at where it is now. The world today is not an easy place for serial killers to thrive in, as it was in the 70s and 80s. It's hard not to get caught nowadays with cameras everywhere and DNA technology being at where it is now. Oh, it's much easier if you get real rural. I've been through little mountain towns where you could drop a body of a cliff, and it'd be lucky to ever get seen again. Hell, you get to towns small enough, someone could shoot you, bury you somewhere on their heavily forested land, and that's the last anyone will see of you. Oh. Friend is a park ranger. They find bodies from falls about twice a year, and a suicide or 2 as well. Many of the bodies are really close to the trail, but animals devour them in a few days. Many times they find bodies years after they died, only a few paces off a well-known trail in a very well-known park system. Dude, I remember in fucking suburban Massachusetts a year or 2 back, on the main highway, 95 or 93 I forget, some motorcyclist pulled over to the side of the road and found decomposing remains of a human there. I think they estimated it had been there for 3 seasons. This is as major a highway outside Boston as you can get. I went to school with a guy that weren't missing. He was eventually found like 2 years later and had committed suicide. His body was literally 10 feet off of a popular walking trail. It was just on the other side of a hill and behind a tree. It takes approximately 359 humans to have enough iron to forge a sword from their blood. So technically you could make a blood iron armor set. Sounds like a good start to a D&D villain. Edgiest weapon ever. Your eye has approximately the same proteins as an egg white, and both react similarly to hydrochloric acid, which solidifies the usually liquid substances. If given access to it, butterflies will happily drink blood. They'll also drink my pint if unguarded, cheeky buggers. When your organs are taken out of your body for abdominal surgery, they don't get placed back in carefully or specifically. You just put all the organs back in, and the body sorts itself out. On top of that, some people are born with a condition called situs inversus, in which all their organs are a mirror image of what is normal. Having this automatically disqualifies you from being in the military. Edit, the military disqualification very well might have been either a lie, or a miscommunicated or outdated fact by my EMT instructor who was in the Army decades ago. Would also tell us little-known laws he knew from his police days, some of which sometimes turned out to have changed since his retirement. That's my bad for not confirming with the almighty Google before posting. When your organs are taken out of your body for abdominal surgery, they don't get placed back in carefully or specifically. You just put all the organs back in, and the body sorts itself out. Back when I was a surgical intern, I remember that, after an abdominal surgery, the surgeon would grab the open edges of the abdominal cavity, like when you hold a plastic bag open, and shimmy the hell out of the person's open wound. I asked him what the hell he was doing, and he said when you shake a person's guts like this, they kinda fall into place on their own. I looked down and he was right. They all fell perfectly into place. The body is fucking weird, man. Like a squishy moist 3D puzzle. On top of that, some people are born with a condition called situs inversus, in which all their organs are a mirror image of what is normal. Having this automatically disqualifies you from being in the military. Why is that? An instructor in my EMT course told us this. I think it's because it would be impossible to know and prepare for, should someone urgently need a medic in the field. He didn't elaborate on it was more like a fun fact he told us. That must be what happened to Frank. Went in for a liver transplant, and they stole his kidney. I believe it's because medical care/surgery in the field is almost always done without the equipment and technology that a standard operating room in a hospital has. So a trauma surgeon for the army is going off of basic anatomy, and if that's backwards, they have no way of knowing until it's too late. This comment was brought to you by Grey's Anatomy. Feeding a human body to pigs will cause them to eat everything except the teeth. You need at least 16 pigs to finish the job in one sitting, so be wary of any man who keeps a pig farm. They will go through a body that weighs 200 pounds in about 8 minutes. That means that a single pig can consume 2 pounds of uncooked flesh every minute. Hence the expression, as greedy as a pig. Dogs like squeaky toys because it sounds like a small animal being crushed. I saw the neighbor's dog get a baby bunny in their yard when I was upstairs. The resemblance to that squeaky toy sound was uncanny. My son told me this fact just the other day. Our dog's squeaky toys don't seem so cute anymore. Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. They discovered that this was because male bodies were embalmed a lot sooner than female bodies. Female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose in order to avoid necrophilia at the embalmers. Amazing fact. Gross fact. Those goddamn mummy fuckers. MILF. Damn you. Vlad the Impaler was called that because he killed his enemies by placing them as first on pointed poles that would slowly skewer them to death. He would also torture people by removing the skin from their legs, coating them in salt, and have goats lick the salt off. The guy was completely fucked. It's an interesting read. He's also hailed as a hero in Romania. I've been to his castle. The area it's in is actually very beautiful. Edit, the castle was a brand castle, which he actually never set foot in. My bad. Still a beautiful place though. Ass-impaled corpses do wonders for landscapes. Look around you, son. When I were a lad, all this were nought but ass-impaled corpses. Really a man ahead of the times, built his own brand and had very clear, consistent messaging. Invade my lands and I'll stick a, well, pointy stick up your ass. While most parents do what they can to prevent or stop their babies from crying, that's not always the case in Japan. That's because it's a 400-year-old Japanese tradition that if a sumo wrestler can make your baby cry, it means he or she will live a healthy life. During a special ceremony, parents hand over their infants to sumo wrestlers who bounce their precious tots up and down, and sometimes even roar in their little faces to get the tears flowing. He's not a baby that cries much, but today he cried a lot for us, and we are very happy about it, Mother Meishige said at a 2014 event. I feel like a few 100-pound man screaming in your face would make any baby cry, so that's kind of cheating. Hell, it would make me cry. Patchouli was used to cover up the smell of decaying flesh during the Black Plague. Foreskin is used to grow skin for those that need skin transplants. A whole new meaning to the insult dick face. The armpit is where all your important nerves in your arm, so if you stab it you can't really use your arm. Edit, please stop replying I need to go to bed, and I also know about the arteries. My friend was in the military police for a while. He was trained to incapacitate drunk and angry soldiers by jamming his thumb as hard as he could into the armpit. Apparently it can knock a person unconscious. Can anybody confirm if this is true? I always thought it was bollocks as I've never heard anybody else reference it. Former MP, trained by ex-SF and Marine Corps McMap instructors, this is true. There's a similar bundle of nerves in your legs, midway down your thigh on the outside, called the common peroneal. A good quick jab or knee strike can buckle both of the victim's knees. Edit, spelling. In school we used to dead leg each other randomly. You'd just be standing in line for lunch and bam, knee to the side of the leg, and you're on the ground with your leg numb. Ah, the good ol' dead leg. Don't miss it. Egyptian mummies are significantly more rare than they used to be because Europeans ate a lot of them. They were looted from Egypt and used as medicine. I never heard that they ate them, but they did grind a shit ton of them up to make a paint called mummy brown. Many famous paintings contain mummy paint. That paint fact is interesting too. I didn't know that. They definitely did eat mummies, though usually as a ground-up powder. Here's a Smithsonian article about the history of eating mummies and other corpses as medicine. Web address. That you smell better when you're asleep. Me specifically. How very kind of you to say. All in a day's work. Or night's work. You have a bunch of microscopic parasites called demodex on your eyelashes and in the pores on your face. They come out at night to lay eggs on and eat the oils on your face. Are they considered useful parasites? Nah, they are considered as an example of commensalism rather than parasitism. They don't harm you, but they benefit from you. They hurt my mental state. Now tell me Demodex isn't a Pokemon. I think it's actually just DMX's full name. Aw, how sweet of them. Your eyeballs flatten when you die, leaving your corpse seeming to have no eyeballs. You could be killed instantly by a brain hemorrhage/aneurysm, and have no warning signs prior. 1 second you're perfectly fine, and the next you're dead. I hate this one. It unsettles me every time I read it. Honestly, it's nothing to fear because you won't know about it if it happens. Also, compared to thousands of other ways, it's not a bad way to go out. I am still scared because I don't have my shit together, and if I die before I get my shit together, everyone will know I didn't have my shit together. Everyone is saint when they die, especially when they die suddenly. They will say at your funeral, yeah, it's really tragic what happened to /you/snooty villager, but man did he have his shit together. Chainsaws were originally invented for childbirth. I have questions. Obligatory thanks for the awards. My guess is umbilical cord, which leads to more questions. I think it was, very poorly, designed to enlarge the birth canal. Not sure if that's correct, but the image it put in my head is gonna haunt me. Here's what I found. 2 doctors invented the chainsaw in 1780 to make the removal of pelvic bone easier and less time-consuming during childbirth. It was powered by a hand crank and looked like a modern-day kitchen knife with little teeth on a chain that wound in an oval. Here is the first surgical chainsaw used for those symphysiotomies. While filming the movie The Exorcist, many actors got injured, the set burned down, a priest was brought in several times to bless the set, and the actor who played Burke, Jack McGoran, died of influenza. Just so you guys know, The Exorcist, a supernatural horror film directed by William Friedkin, was based on the 1971 novel of the same name by William Peter Blatty, which was in turn inspired by the exorcism case of Roland Doe, a pseudonym given to the victim by the Catholic Church. The 1973 film portrays the demonic possession of a 12-year-old girl. The story revolves around how the mother of the child attempts to seek normalcy in her daughter's life with the help of two priests, who conduct exorcism. From its onset, the film went through troubled waters. Prestigious directors not only turned down the film, but ominous events surrounded the year-long shoot. Nearly 9 people died who were associated with the production of the film, and a mysterious fire destroyed the set one weekend. People started to believe that the project itself were cursed. A priest was brought in several times on the set to bless the film, its actors and the project. However, as if all the tragedies during the filmmaking process were not enough, that just after the work was wrapped up, the actor who played Burke in the film died of influenza. Heard that a guy that played one of the medical technician in the movie turned out to be a serial killer. Don't remember where I heard that, so I don't know if it's true. Web address. The radiology technician in The Exorcist, 1973, Paul Battison, was found guilty in 1979 of the September 14, 1977 murder of Addison Verrill, whom he'd met the night before at Badlands, a gay bar on Christopher Street. The prosecution attempted to connect Battison to the murder and dismemberment of 6 men in Greenwich Village, New York between 1975 and 1977. Verrill was not dismembered. The judge decided that the 6 other murders were too ephemeral to have any connection to this case. Exorcist director William Friedkin says Battison helped inspire his next film, Cruising, 1980, with Al Pacino as a police officer going undercover in New York City to solve the murders of gay men in the 70s. Paul Battison was released on August 25, 2003. As far as we know, the killer of those 6 men in Greenwich Village has never been caught. Also, Paul Battison was convicted of murder a few years after filming. He was the technician in the hospital scene and suspected of being a serial killer in NYC. There was a man from France, named Terror, 1772 to 1798, who couldn't stop eating. By the time he was 17, his parents kicked him out. He was eating his own body weight in food daily at the time. When he enlisted in the army rations just couldn't satisfy him. Often, he would sneak out at night and search for offal in the garbage and the gutters. He was hospitalized, doctors trying to find a cure, but at night he would raid the morgue. Scientists unable to stop his ability to eat almost anything began to study it. They'd feed him such random things as eels, he'd swallow whole, lizards, a kitten and puppies, all of which he ate alive. When a 14-month-old baby disappeared, he was chased from the hospital by an angry mob. He later died of tuberculosis. Terror, did you eat a fucking baby? He traveled France in the company of a band of thieves and prostitutes, before becoming the warm-up act to a traveling charlatan. In this act he would swallow corks, stones, live animals and a whole basketful of apples. He then took this act to Paris, where he worked as a street performer. Among other things, he ate a meal intended for 15 people in a single sitting, ate live cats, snakes, lizards and puppies, and swallowed eels whole without chewing. Despite his unusual diet, he was underweight, and with the exception of his eating habits he showed no signs of mental illness other than what was described as an apathetic temperament. General Alexander de Beauharnais decided to put Terror's abilities to military use, and employed him as a courier for the French army, with the intention that he would swallow documents, pass through enemy lines, and recover them from his stool once safely at his destination. He would sneak out of the hospital to scavenge for offal in gutters, rubbish heaps, and outside butchers' shops, and attempted to drink the blood of other patients in the hospital, and to eat the corpses in the hospital morgue. After being suspected of eating a toddler, he was ejected from the hospital. At the autopsy, Terror's gullet was found to be abnormally wide, and when his jaws were opened, surgeons could see down a broad canal into the stomach. 21. His body was found to be filled with pus. 17. his liver and gallbladder were abnormally large, 17, and his stomach was enormous, covered in ulcers, 11, and filling most of his abdominal cavity. Patients undergoing colonoscopies are most commonly put under conscious sedation, meaning the anesthetic doesn't actually numb pain, or even send you unconscious, they just impair your ability to form memories. You are awake and aware of the pain, you just don't remember. This is probably the worst one. Who greenlit that process? I've had an unstated colonoscopy, and I've been told that's standard in the UK. It's not something I do for fun, but it's not like it's agonizing or anything. My doctor says that the sedation is so that people who should be getting regular screenings, like older people at risk of colon cancer, don't get anxious about having the procedure as often as they should. Though really, if that's the case, someone should be working on a less disgusting PrEP liquid. That's the worst part. A rat king is a phenomenon created when a large group of rats become fused together by their tails via ice, dirt, hair, blood, or even feces. Encounters with this horrible phenomenon inspired some of humanity's greatest myths. Web address. I knew what that link would be as you just eloquently described it, yet I still clicked on it, and I was still horrified. I also knew what the link would be thanks to your reply. Yet I still felt compelled to click on it, and lo and behold, just pure awfulness. 0/10 would not recommend. We recommend no one clicks on the aforementioned link, however we know all of you will. To be honest, I wasn't going to click on it, but then you said not to click, and I just had to click. It was disturbing. The thighs contain the most calories. Therefore, thick thighs save lives. Postpartum depression psychosis can show up in a new mother virtually overnight. It can make them hallucinate or go into psychosis, making them think their baby is a demon, or the Antichrist, for example. New mothers kill their own children because of postpartum depression more often than you might like to think. The more the mother knows it's a possibility, the better she'll be able to combat it if it arrives. Edit. Postpartum depression is also a thing, and is also a serious issue, but does not cause hallucinations and delusions, that is specifically related to postpartum psychosis, so I have edited my comment to reflect this. My mistake. Mine got so bad that I thought I needed to kill all my kids as a mercy killing, and then kill myself so the world couldn't hurt us anymore. It's been 5 years and I still feel horribly guilty. I got help and no one was harmed. My mother had it to a small extent when I was a baby, and her telling me about it was my first experience with it. She said she was feeding me, and she looked down, and my face had been replaced with some kind of demon. She immediately looked back up and closed her eyes, and when she looked back down, I was back to normal. She had a background in psychology, and was pretty familiar with the whole process, so luckily she was able to work through it. Hey, I've been there too. I just couldn't fathom why I've deliberately brought another mortal to this horrible world. The burden of it, the guilt was overwhelming. Don't feel guilty about having felt it all. This was the shock, the hormones doing it all to us. You did the best thing you could have done, got help. Sorry to be that lady, but postpartum depression is different from postpartum psychosis. Having experienced both, lucky me, postpartum depression sucks, but postpartum psychosis is a whole other ballgame. Nothing prepares you for hallucinations. Nothing. Postpartum depression and sleep deprivation can result in psychosis seemingly out of nowhere. It's not that uncommon, and it 100% needs to be more widely discussed. I will never ever forget my first psychotic hallucination, not from PPP, thank God. I saw my partner's face change, and I was so terrified I screamed the house down and threw up. Fucking atrocious. Anesthesia awareness exists. Being conscious during surgery is an actual experience people have. During the Victorian era, it was not uncommon for families to take pictures with recently deceased relatives. This was done as one final moment with that person to honor them. We actually have some old family pictures like that. My dad told me that usually old pictures of people are not perfectly clear because people would still move a little bit during the time it took to take the photo, but if someone appears very clearly, i.e., they were sitting perfectly still, that might very likely be because they were dead when the photo was taken. Creeped me out for sure. The US has never made a Purple Heart since the 40s because they mass-produced them in case of a ground invasion of Japan. If you stare at the mirror in the dark long enough, your brain starts to make your eyes see things, usually transforming you, or the room into something horrifying, more usually monsters. This is called peripheral fading or the Troxler effect. If the heat death of the universe turns out to be correct trillions of years from now, rather than a big crunch, then it will reach a point of absolute entropy, and time, as we understand it, will have no meaning. On a long enough timeline, once stars stop forming because gas and dust particles become too rare/scattered to form a sufficient mass to produce fusion, the existing stars will slowly, gradually, exit their main sequence and become red/hypergiants, then collapse to dwarf stars. Eventually even the dwarfs, the faintest light in the universe, will blink out, their matter consumed by black holes. Many trillions of years of Hawking radiation will bleed away even the black holes until everything reaches a state of unending changelessness. No physical processes will exist to mark the difference between one moment to the next. No biological or chemical reactions. No atoms and no movement and no light. Time as a linear concept will not exist because nothing will exist that could justify the presence or effects of time. Sir, this is a guitar center. I actually like that thought. That someday, everything will stand still in absolute peace. No disturbance, just pure entropy. 6 fingers on one hand is actually a dominant trait. Edit, this blew up and ripped my inbox. Tastiest part of human body is cheeks, facial 1. The ratio of blood to mass in a human body peaks before we are 8. A 6-year-old has as much blood in their body as an adult. Edit, my job is weird. When CNN first signed on in 1980, they recorded a band playing a hymn that they were meant to play at the end of the world. It was hidden from the public for 35 years. With everything going on, I am just waiting for it to happen this year. Scientists who study cockroaches usually develop an allergy to them. At the same time, they develop an allergy to pre-ground coffee. In the average person's life, they will walk past at least 10 murderers in their lifetime, and walk past at least 50 sex offenders, that includes rapists and child predators. To know if I worded all of this right. Wow! You are still with us. Thanks for being such a nice person. As long as you are here, why not like this video and subscribe to our channel? Also, you can press the bell icon, so you won't miss any future uploads.